The more things change, the more they stay the same. Several years ago, I wrote about the Battle of Athens, Tennessee. In the article, I showed the corruption in the McMinn County Sheriff's Department, where the sheriff and his deputies did not receive a salary, but were paid for everyone they booked, incarcerated, and released. This perverse incentive led to deputies routinely boarding buses to fine and jail passengers for any alleged violations they could come up with. When subject to this corruption, many GIs returning from World War II were led to challenge the corrupt county sheriff and other county office holders. This challenge led not only to an embattled election, but an armed uprising in an attempt to restore the rule of law. If you don't find this story of corruption compelling, consider this. The same basic system of corruption in the McMinn County Sheriff's Department exists across the country today. While the McMinn County process did not have a name, the 21st century version does. Civil asset forfeiture. So we'll discuss that next on the Constitution Study.
Love the neighbors and have a few good friends. Every day we're everyday Americans. Oh, every day we're everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read and study the Constitution, teach rise and generation, be free. And I'm so glad you could join me today. You know, civil asset forfeiture is one of those topics that really gets me to grind my teeth. And hopefully by the end of this episode, you'll grind your teeth as well. That's actually a good thing because maybe it will lead us to do something to fix it. If you want to find out more, head to the website, constitutionstudy.com. I'm going to include more information at the end of the episode. So for now, let's jump into this civil asset forfeiture. Every so often, I see another article about the evil practice of civil asset forfeiture. I call it evil because it not only violates the rights of the American people, but common sense as well. What is civil asset forfeiture? Well, according to the Wex Legal Dictionary, civil forfeiture allows the government, typically the police, to seize and then keep or sell any property that is allegedly involved in a crime or illegal activity. Did you notice the word allegedly? I'll have more on that later. An apparent holdover from English law, civil asset forfeiture was used during Prohibition to seize the property of bootleggers. However, during the 1980s and the war on drugs, Congress passed the Comprehensive Forfeiture Act of 1984, which reads, Comprehensive Forfeiture Act of 1984 amends the Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organization Statute, or RICO, to specify that property subject to forfeiture or racketeering activities includes all proceeds obtained directly or indirectly from racketeering activities, and real and tangible and intangible personal property. The stated goal of the act was to prevent drug cartels from using their vast ill-gotten gains in their legal defense. While the idea of preventing criminals from benefiting from their crimes seems laudable, as is so often the case, the consequences can be terrible. The Comprehensive Forfeiture Act also included the Equitable Sharing Program, whereby state, local, and tribal and law enforcement agencies could receive a share of the proceeds from federal civil forfeitures. Is this really any different than the McMinn County Sheriff's Department paying deputies for arrests and bookings? In both cases, law enforcement has a financial interest in finding crime. This perverse incentive led McMinn County Sheriff's deputies to shake down anyone they thought could pay the fines they imposed. During 1945 and 1946, thousands of GIs returning home from the war were stopped by law enforcement and fined, with no due process. Today, we see examples of law enforcement seizing cash simply because they think carrying a large amount of cash is a sign of criminal behavior. It's not just cash, though, since law enforcement has seized cars and homes because a child was selling drugs without the owner's knowledge or consent. While many of these egregious abuses of our rights happen under state civil asset forfeiture laws, others use federal law and the Equitable Sharing Program to line their own pockets. To understand just how evil civil asset forfeiture is, let's look at how it is described by the Wex Dictionary from Cornell Law School. As I've already quoted, civil forfeiture is the government seizing property they allege was involved in a crime or criminal activity. The Wex Dictionary goes on. Owners need not ever be arrested or convicted of a crime for their cash, cars, or even real estate to be taken away permanently by the government. The government does not have to charge the property owner with any specific crime in order to seize the property. It must prove only by a preponderance of evidence that the property is legally forfeitable. That's right. Under this perversion of justice, not only can government seize the property of any innocent person, they don't even have to charge you with a crime. This is a blatant violation of the due process clauses of both the 5th and 14th Amendments. The 5th Amendment reads, "No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." And the 14th Amendment states, "Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." What's this due process that the 5th and 14th Amendments are talking about? According to the Free Legal Dictionary, due process is an established course for judicial proceedings or other governmental activities designed to safeguard the legal rights of the individual. If you're wondering why I used the Free Legal Dictionary for this definition rather than the Wex Dictionary I've used in the rest of this article, the answer is simple. The Wex Dictionary does not define the term due process, only how the courts have interpreted over the years. Since in most civil asset forfeiture cases, property is seized in a manner that is not designed to safeguard the legal rights of the individual, the actions of those involved violate due process. How do they get away with such a blatant violation of the Constitution? By charging the property, not the person. Again, from the Wex Legal Dictionary. Such a proceeding is conducted in rem against the property itself, rather than in personam against the owner of the property. For this reason, civil forfeiture case names often appear strange, such as United States versus 8 Rhodesian stone statues, because the property is the defendant. That's right. The government doesn't charge you, but your property, as if it had done something illegal. To show you just how ridiculous this is, the Free Legal Dictionary defines a defendant as the party against which an action is brought. Furthermore, the Free Legal Dictionary defines a party in this context as a person. Yet the government isn't charging a person, but an inanimate object, so there is no party to bring a legal action against. The abuses of civil asset forfeiture continue, since even the burden of proof, the preponderance of evidence, is in fact a fraud. From the Wex Legal Dictionary. Under the preponderance standard, the burden of proof is met when the party with the burden convinces the fact finder that there is a greater than 50% chance that the claim is true. In many of the cases I reviewed, the evidence is nothing more than the word of an officer versus the defendant. For example, in one case, a U.S. citizen or retired Marine was stopped for a minor traffic infringement. When the officer searched the vehicle with the owner's consent, he found over $10,000 in cash. When asked why he had so much cash on him, the person the officer had stopped stated he did not trust banks. However, the officer claimed to believe that the reason the person was carrying so much cash was for illegal activities. It was literally the word of the officer versus the word of the owner, and guess whose word was given more credence? If you guessed the officer, you'd be right. This doesn't even meet the preponderance of evidence standard, since no evidence of criminal activity was discovered by the seizing officer. Without a warrant, an exigent circumstance, or any real probable cause, or even evidence other than the officer's gut, the victim of the traffic stop was robbed of over $10,000. How is this not a violation of the Fourth Amendment's unreasonable search and seizure clause, which reads, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated." I wish I could say this was an unusual event in America today. Numerous groups fighting civil asset forfeiture list hundreds, if not thousands, of examples of this legalized theft every year. While the officer may not have directly and personally benefited from the crime, his department most likely did, whether because the seizure was made under state law or because of the federal equitable sharing policy. From the victim's point of view, how is this any different than the McMinn County Sheriff's Department simply charging and finding them without any evidence? Sadly, the criminal abuses of civil asset forfeiture do not stop with the seizure itself. After the property has been seized, the burden of proof shifts to the owner, who must prove that the property was not involved in or obtained as a result of illegal activity. Now that you've been deprived of your property without any due process, the government expects you to prove that the property was not involved or obtained from illegal activity. This twisted bit of logic is called proving a negative. Let's look at another context. Say you are accused of beating your spouse. How do you prove that you've never beaten your spouse? Most likely you can't, Because without having evidence of your entire life from the time you met your spouse until today, there will always be a shadow of a doubt that it happened when others were not looking. That is why in America, you're supposed to be considered innocent until proven guilty. Yet here we have a simple allegation of wrong turning the entire justice system against the defendant by simply claiming they are now accusing law enforcement officers of criminal activity. Imagine any other situation where, without any real proof, you are considered guilty and must now prove your innocence. This was seen during the Reign of Terror after the French Revolution, where a mere denunciation was enough to convict someone unless they could prove they were innocent. Now, what was the outcome of the McMinn County Sheriff's Department policies around deputy pay? Deputies routinely boarded buses passing through and dragged sleepy-eyed passengers to jail to pay their $16.50 fine for drunkenness, whether they were guilty or not. Arrests ran as high as 115 per weekend. The fee system was profitable, but record-keeping was required, and the money could be traced. It was less troublesome to collect kickbacks for allowing roadhouses to operate openly. Cooperative owners would point out influential patrons. They were not bothered, but the rest were subject to shakedowns. Prostitution, liquor, and gambling grew so prevalent that it became common knowledge in Tennessee that Athens was, quote-unquote, wide open. As I stated previously, when the GIs returned, they were subject to this corruption. In response, they began running for county office. The campaigns were heated, the rhetoric caustic, and the election was manipulated. Legally appointed voting monitors were arrested. Legal voters were turned away while illegal voters were allowed to vote. Ballot boxes were confiscated, then taken to be secretly counted by the very election officials accused of fraud. This led to an armed group of veterans demanding an open count of the votes. After a significant battle, including both firefights and the use of explosives by the GIs, fraudulent tally sheets were discovered where the ballots were being counted. What can we expect from the criminal funding of law enforcement via civil asset forfeiture? I would hope we would see the light before people are compelled to defend their rights with arms. Recent events would suggest otherwise. Did the illegal fines McMinn County deputies collected cause the election interference? Not directly, but the interference was to elect officials willing to continue the shakedown of Americans by law enforcement. Have the criminal abuses of civil asset forfeiture led to the election interference we've seen over the past several years? Again, not directly, though it has been used to keep government actors who support not only civil asset forfeiture, but a myriad of illegal government actions and programs in office. Since the corruption in McMinn County, Tennessee, back in the 1940s was overthrown by a group of armed citizens bent on protecting their rights, does that mean it'll take another group of armed citizens in the 21st century to restore rights to the American people? I hope not. The problems in McMinn County did not start in 1945, but in 1936, and possibly earlier, with the election of a corrupt sheriff and other county officials. The corruption metastasized over the years through a combination of neglect and an expectation that someone else should fix the problem. Only when a group of Americans who decided that their liberty and that of their families was worth the fight did the situation change. As the people of the United States continue down a similar road, as the citizens of McMinn County did over 70 years ago, I have to wonder, will we realize what our neglect and apathy may cost before it's too late? As Patrick Henry asked, is life so dear and peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Is life so dear and peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? It's quite a question. It's a question we need to answer right here, right now, in the 21st century. Because, ladies and gentlemen, slavery and chains are what we're facing. If a government actor can steal from you simply because they claim they think that this was illegally gotten gain, without any due process, without any trial, with the burden of proof immediately placed on you to prove that whatever it is they've seized, you obtained legally. Ladies and gentlemen, that is an inversion of the republic. That is government actors ruling over the people, kind of the way, well, the governors and the king and the governors of the state ruled over us when we were colonists. They didn't need a warrant. They'd simply walk in and claim, oh, this is contraband. We're going to confiscate it. But I purchased it legally. Prove it. Well, what do you want? You want an affidavit? No, if you can't prove it, it's ours. And we'll sell it or we'll use it. We'll do whatever we want with it. That's what's happening today with this civil forfeiture. Civil asset forfeiture is often called. Now, what can you do about it? Well, the first thing you should be doing is you should be talking to your state representative and your county sheriff. Find out what the laws are about civil asset forfeiture, and then work with them to change the laws to require due process before the confiscation of any property, and the burden of proof to remain on the government to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the material confiscated was material that was collected illegally. In other words, that you have drug money or crime money, that it actually is illegally acquired. And the benefit of doubt must go to the citizen, not the government. I'm not saying we're going to fix this overnight, but make sure your sheriff's going to protect you. And if your state does have a civil asset forfeiture law, make sure that you get rid of it, or at least change it to the point where the burden of proof is on government, that they have to prove via due process that this material was illegally obtained. It's a basic fundamental concept of freedom, of the republic, and it is being undermined. It has been so for decades. Do we really want to live in an empire where the government can simply take your stuff because they say so? Where the word of a government actor supersedes your word? Your word doesn't count when a law enforcement officer says so. Is that really what you want to live in? Now, if you want some more information, again, head to the website, constitutionstudy.com. Find the article. Just search for Athens, and you'll find the Battle of Athens article that I've written about. I've written about a couple of times. Share that with your elected officials. Again, with your sheriff, with your county officials, with your state officials. Build the case of the evils of civil asset forfeiture, and then help them move that forward. And oh, by the way, while you're working on it, make sure that whatever law you change declares that we will not participate in the federal sharing program, the equitable sharing program. That's what a lot of places have done. The states have, well, we've gotten rid of our civil asset forfeiture law, but listen, if the officer takes us under a federal statute, well, we'll get the money from the feds. That's a bit of a sleight of hand. We need to stop this. And it's up to we the people. If you're expecting politicians to do that, good luck. If you're expecting law enforcement to do that, they're the ones getting paid for this. No, it's up to you, and it's up to me. We need to work together to help get rid of this scourge on the American people. Now, one of the things you need to help, join the Patriots program. This is one of the items I'm bringing up in the Patriots program to help us build a knowledge base and a set of tools and tactics to help get rid of civil asset forfeiture. We can't do it alone. We need your help. Go to constitutionstudy.com/patriots, find out more. If you're interested, take the boot camp. Pass the boot camp, you'll get an invitation to join the Patriots. We're working to help protect the rights of all of us. Won't you join us? Or will you simply sit back and enjoy the peace and tranquility of living in chains and being a slave? The decision is yours. The decision is yours whether or not you'll come back and join us here next time for the Constitution Study.